Georg Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel, who lived from 1770 to 1831, stands as a giant in the history of Western philosophy. His work is complex and challenging, yet profoundly influential. Hegel's philosophy of history in particular has sparked much debate and discussion. Central to Hegel's thinking is the concept of Geist, often translated as spirit. He saw history as the unfolding of this spirit, a progressive journey towards self-consciousness and freedom. For Hegel, history was not a random series of events. It had a direction, a purpose. He believed that each historical period contributed to the development of spirit. These contributions were not always positive or peaceful. However, even conflict and struggle played a role in driving spirit forward. Hegel's philosophy of history is often criticized for being Eurocentric. He placed European civilization at the pinnacle of historical development. This perspective colored his views on non-European cultures, including Islam. While acknowledging certain aspects of Islamic civilization, Hegel ultimately positioned Islam as a stage on the path towards the higher truth embodied in Christianity and culminating in the European Enlightenment. Hegel organized his philosophy of history around the concept of historical stages. Each stage represented a step in the development of spirit. Hegel saw Islam as emerging after the decline of the Roman Empire and the rise of Christianity. He placed it within the broader context of the Oriental world, which he considered the childhood of humanity. According to Hegel, the Oriental world was characterized by a lack of individual freedom. He believed that individuals were largely absorbed into the collective. Despotic rule was the norm. Religion, too, reflected this lack of freedom. Hegel argued that, in the Orient, religion reinforced existing power structures. Islam, in Hegel's view, represented a step forward from earlier Eastern religions. It introduced the concept of one God, a significant advance from polytheism. However, he argued that Islam's conception of God remained abstract and distant. This abstract nature, according to Hegel, limited the development of individual self-consciousness. One of Hegel's main critiques of Islam centered on its conception of God. Hegel saw the Islamic God as overly transcendent, emphasizing God's absolute otherness and unknowability. This stood in contrast to the Christian notion of God, which Hegel believed offered a more personal and intimate relationship with the divine. Hegel argued that Islam's emphasis on God's absolute unity and incomprehensibility hindered the development of a more nuanced religious consciousness. He believed that true religious experience required a sense of dialogue and reconciliation between humanity and the divine. This was something he found lacking in his understanding of Islam. Hegel's interpretation of Islamic theology, however, has been challenged by many scholars. Critics argue that his understanding of Islam was limited and based on secondary sources. He did not have access to the full breadth of Islamic theological writings. They point to the rich tradition of Islamic mysticism, or Sufism, which emphasizes a deeply personal and experiential relationship with God. A key point of divergence between Islam and Christianity, in Hegel's view, lay in their respective stances on the relationship between God's will and human freedom. He interpreted Islam's central tenet of submission to the will of God as representing a form of religious and social subjugation. He contrasted this with Christianity, which he believed offered a path to reconciliation between divine authority and human freedom. He argued that Christianity's emphasis on God's love and forgiveness allowed individuals to achieve a higher level of spiritual and ethical development. Again, Hegel's interpretation has been subject to criticism. Critics argue that his understanding of Islamic submission lacks nuance. They point out that submission in Islam is not about blind obedience, but rather about aligning one's will with the divine will. This alignment, they argue, is seen as a path to liberation, not subjugation. Despite his critical stance, Hegel did acknowledge the historical and cultural achievements of Islamic civilization. He recognized the role of Islamic scholars in preserving and transmitting ancient Greek knowledge during the European Dark Ages. He also acknowledged the contributions of Islamic mathematicians, astronomers, and philosophers to the development of science and learning. Hegel was particularly impressed by the rapid spread of Islam across vast territories. He saw this as a testament to the power of its message and the efficiency of its social organization. He recognized that Islamic civilization had fostered a flourishing of art, architecture, and literature. However, Hegel ultimately viewed these achievements as belonging to a bygone era. He believed that Islamic civilization had reached its peak in the Middle Ages and was now in decline. This perspective reflected the prevailing Eurocentric biases of his time, which saw European civilization as the torchbearer of progress and modernity. One of the most problematic aspects of Hegel's view of Islam was his association of the religion with fanaticism. He believed that Islam's emphasis on the absolute nature of God and the unquestionable authority of the Quran could lead to a dangerous form of religious zealotry. Hegel's views on fanaticism were shaped by his interpretation of Islamic history. He pointed to episodes of conquest and expansion as evidence of an inherent tendency towards religious extremism. This perspective, however, ignored the complex historical and political factors that contributed to these events. Hegel's association of Islam with fanaticism has been widely criticized as a form of Orientalist prejudice. Critics argue that it relies on a simplistic and distorted understanding of Islamic beliefs and practices. They point out that fanaticism is not unique to Islam and can be found in various forms throughout history and across cultures. It is crucial to recognize the limitations of Hegel's perspective on Islam. His views were influenced by the prevailing Eurocentrism of 19th-century Europe. He had limited access to primary sources on Islam and relied heavily on the works of earlier European thinkers, many of whom harbored their own biases. Hegel's philosophy of history, with its teleological focus on the progressive development of spirit, led him to view Islam as a stage on the path towards the higher truth embodied in European civilization. This perspective prevented him from fully appreciating the complexities and nuances of Islamic thought and practice. Furthermore, Hegel's association of Islam with fanaticism reflected a common prejudice of his time. This prejudice continues to have harmful consequences, fueling discrimination and misunderstanding. It is essential to approach Hegel's work with a critical eye, recognizing its historical context and the limitations of its perspective. Hegel's writings on Islam serve as a reminder of the importance of critical engagement with historical texts. While acknowledging Hegel's contributions to philosophy, it is crucial to move beyond his limited and often distorted view of Islam. Contemporary scholarship on Islam offers a far more nuanced and accurate understanding of the religion's history, theology, and practice. Scholars from diverse backgrounds are challenging Eurocentric narratives and highlighting the rich diversity of thought and expression within the Muslim world. Engaging with these diverse perspectives is essential for fostering greater understanding and dialogue between cultures and religions. It is through open-mindedness, empathy, and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions that we can move towards a more inclusive and accurate understanding of the world. Hegel's perspective on Islam, while deeply flawed, offers a valuable opportunity for reflection. It reminds us of the enduring power of Eurocentrism and the importance of critically examining historical narratives. Hegel's work also highlights the dangers of essentialism, the tendency to reduce complex cultures and religions to simplistic stereotypes. Islam, like all major religions, is a rich and diverse tradition with a complex history and a multiplicity of interpretations. Moving beyond Hegel requires embracing this complexity. It demands a commitment to engaging with diverse voices and perspectives, challenging our own biases, and striving for a more nuanced and accurate understanding of the world around us. Only then can we begin to dismantle the harmful legacies of prejudice and work towards a more just and equitable future.